My family forgot my birthday for the fifth year in a row. Then, exactly 9 days later, my mother forwarded me a shared payment link titled Marcus's Celebration. Your share, $2,800. I opened it at my desk at 11:14 on a Tuesday morning. I read every line. I closed my laptop. I sat very still for about 45 seconds, staring at the wall above my monitor where I keep a framed quote from a mentor. Follow the money. It always tells the truth. Then I got to work. My name is Sarah Kendall. I'm 34 years old. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon, 6 blocks from the river, with a good coffee maker and a plant named Gerald who has survived 4 years under my care, which I consider one of my more impressive long-term commitments. I am a senior forensic auditor at a mid-sized financial consulting firm. My job, in simple terms, is to find money that people are pretending isn't there. I reconstruct paper trails. I cross-reference transactions. I sit across from people who have built elaborate explanations for things they did on purpose, and I listen politely until they finish. Then I open my folder and show them what the numbers actually say. I've built fraud cases out of a misplaced decimal and a suspicious weekend timestamp. I once caught an embezzlement scheme because someone had used round numbers, and real expenses are almost never round. What I am saying is this. I am professionally trained to see exactly what is happening when someone dresses a choice up as an accident. So when my mother sent me a carefully formatted, color-coded payment request for my brother's yacht party, 9 days after my birthday passed without a text, a call, a card, a voice message, or a single emoji in the family group chat, I want you to understand, I did not see a family asking for help. I saw a ledger with a discrepancy. I saw a pattern that had been running long enough to leave a paper trail. And I already knew before I clicked a single link exactly what kind of audit I was about to conduct. Let me walk you through the invoice, because the detail matters. The payment link broke down like this. $2,800 was listed as my family contribution toward a private yacht charter my brother Marcus had booked for his 38th birthday on the Columbia River. The itemized breakdown included a 2-hour open bar package, a catered dinner for 20 guests from a waterfront restaurant Marcus favored, a DJ with a custom playlist Marcus had apparently curated over several weeks, a professional photo package, and a gratuity line that had been pre-calculated and divided among contributors before anyone had asked whether the contributors agreed. The document was clean, formatted. The kind of table you build when you want something to look official, when you want the recipient to feel that the number has already been decided and their role is simply to comply. My mother had clearly spent real time on it. The same mother who had not sent me a text message, a voicemail, a birthday card, a GIF in the family group chat, a happy birthday comment on any platform, or a single spoken or written word on September 14th, which was my birthday, which fell on the same date every year, as birthdays tend to do, and had done so for 34 consecutive years without ambiguity or surprise. I want to be fair. I want to tell you that I considered at first the possibility of an accident. People get busy. Life moves fast. In years 1 and 2, I had accepted these explanations without asking for them, had offered them to myself like aspirin for a headache I was trying not to examine. By year 3, I had stopped telling myself they forgot and started telling myself it didn't matter. By year 4, I had gotten so good at not mattering to myself that I had genuinely, on September 14th, not expected anything, not checked my phone, not felt the specific hollow feeling until 2 days later when I saw my cousin post a birthday message to her dog on Instagram, and the hollow feeling arrived anyway, uninvited, and sat down without asking. Year 5, I had worked a 12-hour day, come home, eaten leftover soup, and watched a documentary about financial crimes. My phone had stayed quiet all evening. I had told myself this was fine. I had believed it, mostly. And then 9 days later, $2,800. I scrolled to the attached guest list because in my work you always read the supporting documents. 22 names. I went through them slowly, the way I go through expense reports, methodically, not looking for something, just reading, waiting for the thing that doesn't belong to surface on its own. My parents were listed. Marcus, obviously, as the guest of honor. His girlfriend Priya. 12 of Marcus's friends, several of whom I had met once or twice at family events. An aunt and uncle. 3 cousins. Two of Marcus's work colleagues who had apparently made the cut to a family birthday charter. I got to the bottom. I scrolled back up and read again. Then I opened a clean document and typed the list out by hand, the way I do when I need to be absolutely certain I haven't misread something, because misreading something is a thing that happens to other people but occasionally also to me, and before you make a decision based on data, you verify the data. 22 names. I typed all 22. I typed my own name at the bottom and stared at it. The charter was for 22 people. The payment request had gone to 23. I was not on the guest list. They had calculated my share. They had formatted my contribution line with my full legal name, Sarah Marie Kendall, family contribution, $2,800. They had built the table and written the email and sent the payment link and done all of that with enough care and deliberateness that no one could argue it was casual. But in the column that determined who actually got to board that boat, stand on that deck, raise a glass to my brother, and watch the Columbia River slide past in the evening light, in that column, I did not exist. I sat with that for a long time. In forensic work, when you find the central irregularity, the transaction that breaks the pattern, the number that doesn't reconcile, there is a moment before you do anything else where you simply acknowledge what you're looking at. You don't rush past it. You let the finding be a finding. I let it be a finding. They remembered me well enough to charge me. They did not remember me well enough to invite me. I want to tell you I cried. It would make this story more sympathetic, maybe, and it would be true to the version of me who existed 5 or 6 years ago, the one who would have called her mother immediately, voice already cracking before the line connected, asking if there had been a mistake, giving them the exit ramp, helping them find the narrative where no one had meant any harm and everything was fine and she was too sensitive and should probably just let it go. But I've spent 15 years watching people cry over money that wasn't theirs to spend. I've watched embezzlers weep in conference rooms. I've watched executives produce genuine tears while explaining that the $400,000 in a personal account was just a misunderstanding of accounting terms. And I've learned, not coldly, just accurately, that tears are not always grief. Sometimes they are pressure. And I had given my family enough pressure points over the years. I was done donating more. What I felt instead was something quieter and considerably more final. I've tried to describe it to my friend Nadia since, and the closest I've gotten is this. Imagine you've been standing in a room for a long time, waiting for something. You don't know exactly what. And one day you simply understand, with complete clarity, that the thing is not coming. And rather than devastation, what you feel is permission. The door doesn't slam. It just clicks shut, softly on its own, and you realize you're already on the other side of it. I picked up my phone. I opened the payment link. I entered $1, not 2,801, and in the memo field, I typed 4 words. Not on the manifest. I hit confirm. Then I set my phone face down on the desk, opened a new spreadsheet, and titled it, Kendall Family Resource Audit, FI 2019 to 2024. Before I tell you what was in that spreadsheet and what happened the first time my mother saw it, I want to pause for a second because I'm curious about something. What time is it where you are right now? And be honest with me. Have you ever been the person in your family who pays quietly, absorbs gracefully, and tells herself it's fine? Drop your time zone and a yes or no in the comments. I want to see where the story is landing. The spreadsheet took me 2 evenings to build. I am thorough by habit and pathologically organized by necessity, and I wanted this to be complete before I did anything else. Not as a weapon. As a record. Because in my experience, the people who benefit most from a story staying vague are the people who wrote the most damaging chapters of it. I went back 5 years. The Spotify family plan I had added my parents to in 2020 because my mother mentioned she liked listening to audiobooks on walks, and I thought it would be a nice thing to do. For $0.99 per month for their portion, compounded across 51 months at the time of my audit, $254.49. A small number. I noted it anyway because audits are not about drama, they are about completeness. The credit card. I had added my mother as an authorized user in the spring of 2021. She had called me on a Wednesday evening, voice tight the way it got when she was embarrassed but needed to push through the embarrassment to ask for something, and told me her own card had been declined at a pharmacy and she didn't want to make a big thing of it, but could she use mine just until the billing cycle reset? I said yes immediately, the way I always said yes immediately to my family, without making her feel worse than she already felt for asking. I added her that night. She was still on it 38 months later. In that time, she had used it 11 times, for a total of $1,340. The pharmacy visit I knew about. The other 10 I found in my statements. 3 restaurant charges on evenings I had not been present for, a spa afternoon at a place near her neighborhood, 2 grocery runs that coincided with the weeks before family holidays, a birthday gift purchase for Marcus in 2023, charged, I noted, to my card, and 4 smaller miscellaneous transactions that I had simply never noticed because I had simply never looked. My father's $900. Borrowed in March of 2021, when he said a check from a side consulting project was running late and he needed to cover a gap before the end of the month. He had told me he would pay it back within 2 weeks. I had told him not to worry about it, the way you say that when you want someone to feel better, not realizing they will interpret it as a formal debt cancellation. The gap, apparently, had never closed. The $900 had simply become mine. Marcus had my Netflix login. Past tense, as I corrected this in real time while building the spreadsheet. My parents were on my Amazon household, had been since I extended it to them as a Christmas gesture in 2022. They had made 34 purchases under my Prime membership in the intervening time. I am not going to calculate the implied subsidy on shipping alone. The number would annoy me. The cloud storage plan. 3 years. Automatic billing. 2,411 photos of family events backed up under my account. Events which, I noted with a kind of tired irony, contained very few photos of me, because I was generally the one holding the camera. When I finished the spreadsheet, I sat back and looked at it for a while. The total was not the point.
I want to be clear about that.
I was not outraged by the dollar amount. I earn a reasonable salary. I live within my means. None of these individual items had created genuine hardship. The point was the pattern they described, when you laid them end to end. The pattern said, Sarah will accommodate. Sarah will not ask. Sarah will add you to the plan, extend the card, cover the gap, share the account, absorb the cost, and she will do all of this without requiring acknowledgement because she has been trained to experience her own generosity as something slightly embarrassing that should not be made into a production. And then she will receive an invoice for $2,800 for a boat she is not invited onto, and she will be expected to pay it. I went account by account. Streaming services. Shared subscriptions. The Amazon household. The cloud storage. The credit card authorized users. My mother removed. The backup card I had given Marcus for gas in 2022 during a period when he said he was getting back on his feet. Cancelled. The food delivery account Priya had been ordering through using a discount attached to my loyalty number. Logged out. Every password changed. Every 2-factor authentication rerouted to my phone, and my phone only. Each click felt like something. Not satisfaction, exactly. Something more like accuracy. Like correcting a document that had been filed wrong for years and finally putting it in the right folder. When I was finished, I opened the family group thread. I did not draft and redraft. I did not ask Nadia to review it. I typed what was true in the voice I use for findings reports. Measured, specific, free of heat. Effective as of today, all accounts, subscriptions, payment methods, and shared memberships registered under my name are for my personal use only. I've made the necessary adjustments on my end. Please make your own arrangements going forward. I won't be contributing to the charter. Have a wonderful celebration for Marcus. I hit send. I closed the laptop. I made tea. I sat by the window and watched the light change on the building across the street and felt, for the first time in a long time, like the square footage of my own life belonged to me. The first response arrived 11 minutes later. My mother. Sarah, what is this? Dad can't get into Prime. Call me. Not. Are you alright? Not. Did something happen? Just. Dad can't get in. Fix it. I noted the framing. In forensic work, you note the framing. My father followed 4 minutes after that. Your mother is upset. Fix whatever you changed. This isn't necessary. Marcus took longer. 42 minutes, which I suspected meant he had been on the phone with our parents before composing his response. Okay, I don't know what your issue is, but you're making my birthday about you.
Typical. Congrats.
Priya, who was not on the family thread but had my personal number, sent a separate text. Sarah, I don't know what happened, and I'm not asking you to tell me. I just wanted to say I hope you're okay. I appreciated that. I replied with a short thank you and saved her message in a folder I labeled differently from the others. Then my mother called. I watched her name pulse on the screen and did not answer. Then my father. Then Marcus. Then my mother twice more in the space of 20 minutes. I let all of them go to voicemail because I was not ready to have a conversation that would be shaped by whoever spoke first, and I have learned from years of interviews that the person who controls the pace of a conversation usually controls its outcome. The texts continued into the evening. My mother, at 6:47 p.m., I cannot believe you are doing this over a birthday. You are 34 years old, Sarah. Marcus worked so hard to plan something special, and you are sabotaging it because we didn't make a fuss. It is honestly embarrassing. I read that 3 times. Not because I needed to read it 3 times to understand it, but because I wanted to make sure I understood it correctly before I filed it. She was not sorry that they had forgotten my birthday 5 years in a row. She was not sorry that I had been invoiced for a party I wasn't invited to. She was embarrassed by my response. My response was the problem. My response was the thing that had introduced difficulty into a situation that had previously run so smoothly, and that smoothness, I understood clearly now, had always depended entirely on my willingness to accept things that were not acceptable. At 7:15, Marcus. Mom says you reported the card as stolen. That is literally fraud, Sarah. I will get Uncle David involved if you don't fix this tonight. Uncle David was a retired paralegal who had not practiced anything in 11 years and whose most recent legal activity, to my knowledge, involved disputing a cable bill and losing. I had not reported any card as stolen. I had removed authorized user access from an account registered in my legal name, funded by my salary, and governed by a cardholder agreement to which I was the sole party. These are not the same thing. The fact that my family could not distinguish between the two was, and I mean this in the most precise professional sense, an extremely revealing data point. At 9:02 p.m., my mother again. You always do this. You wait until everything is about Marcus, and then you make it about yourself. Do you know how selfish that is? After everything we have done for you? After everything we have done for you. I opened the spreadsheet. I looked at the total. I added a new column, notes. In the first cell, I typed, after everything we have done for you. I saved the file. I made another cup of tea. I went to bed at a reasonable hour and slept, uninterrupted, for the first time in longer than I could remember. My mother requested a meeting 4 days after the messages stopped arriving in real-time bursts and started arriving in the more deliberate, considered pattern that meant someone had thought about strategy. Her text said, "We need to sit down and talk, Sarah. As a family. Come ready to listen and be reasonable. Come ready to listen and be reasonable." I read that to Nadia over the phone that evening. There was a pause. Then Nadia said, "She means come ready to agree." I told her I had already figured that out. Nadia told me to bring documentation. I told her I had already built the folder. I agreed to meet, but I specified the location, a cafe 3 blocks from my office, not the family home. The family home has 34 years of accumulated emotional architecture designed to make me smaller. The cafe had good lighting, public witnesses, and an exit I could use without anyone blocking a hallway. I arrived 4 minutes early. They were already seated, which meant they had arrived even earlier, which meant this had been planned as a staging. My mother in her cream cardigan and the pearl earrings she wore when she wanted to project wounded dignity. My father with his arms crossed and his jaw set in the expression he used with contractors who had missed deadlines. Marcus with his sunglasses pushed up on his head, scrolling his phone, performing the role of someone too unbothered to be concerned while being visibly concerned. No one stood when I came in. No one said hello with warmth. Not one person, in the moment between my arrival and my sitting down, said happy belated birthday. I noted the absence. I sat down. I placed my folder on the table in front of me, without opening it. My mother began before I had settled fully into the chair. I think we all need to take a breath here and remember that we are a family and that families work through things instead of. Mom, I said, I'd like to ask something before we start. What's today's date? She blinked. The 23rd. Sarah, what does? And do you know what date it was 9 days before you sent me the payment link? A pause. The kind of pause that has information in it. Sarah. September 14th, I said. Same day it's been for 34 years. My father recrossed his arms. Marcus put down his phone, which told me the performance of unbotheredness had reached its limit. I opened the folder. I placed the yacht invoice on the table first, face up, my name in the contribution line visible to everyone. Then the guest list, with the absent 23rd slot. I put my finger on the blank space and left it there for a moment. I'm listed as a contributing party, I said. I'm not listed as a guest. I'd like to understand how you reconcile those two things. My mother's composure held, but her jaw tightened. That was an oversight. You know you're always. Always what? I said. I need you to finish that sentence. She didn't. My father tried a different angle. Catherine, my middle name, the authoritative register. This kind of behavior, punishing the whole family because you feel overlooked, it's not who you are. It's not how we raised you. How you raised me, I said carefully, was to be useful. That's different from raising someone to feel like a person. I pulled out the spreadsheet and placed it on top of the invoice. I want to show you something. I walked them through it, line by line. Not quickly, not with heat, the way I would present findings to a client. The Spotify plan, the credit card charges, the $900, the Amazon household, the streaming accounts, the cloud storage with 2,400 photographs in it, most of which were of other people at events I had helped fund. My mother's face moved through a sequence of expressions she was working to suppress. My father looked at a spot somewhere to the left of the table. Marcus watched me with the particular expression of someone recalculating a situation they thought they had already solved. When I got to the $900, my father said, "That was a loan between family members. You told me not to worry about it." I said that so you wouldn't feel bad. I said. I didn't say it so it wouldn't count. Marcus leaned back and produced the short, tight laugh. So this is about money.
Okay.
I'll Venmo you the 900 right now. He picked up his phone. I watched him do it. Marcus, I said, if I wanted $900, I would have asked 5 years ago. I'm not here about the amount. I'm here because you can expense my silence, use my accounts, invoice me for your celebrations, and not one of you can send a text on September 14th. He put the phone down. The table went quiet in the way it goes quiet when something true has been said in a room that has been operating on a version of events that was never quite true, and everyone present feels the gap between the two versions at the same moment. My mother said quietly, "You make it sound like we don't love you." "I know you love me," I said. And I meant it. This was not a performance. I'm asking whether you respect me. Because love without respect is just affection with conditions. And I have been meeting the conditions for a very long time. Her eyes filled. This time I noticed she did not use the tears to redirect the conversation. She just let them sit there, which was the most honest thing she had done since I arrived. "I think we need to figure out what you actually want from us," my father said, finally, in a voice that was tired rather than commanding. "For now," I said. I picked up my folder. "I want you to pay your own bills. I want to be remembered on my birthday. And I want the next time you plan something that involves my money to also involve my name on the guest list." I stood and pushed to my chair. "Those are not complicated asks. I'll leave you to think about them." I left enough cash for my coffee. I walked out into the gray Portland afternoon with my folder under my arm and my hands shaking slightly. Not from distress, I realized, but from the specific physical aftermath of staying very calm for a very long time. My father called my name once behind me, sharp, from inside the cafe. The old reflex, the trained response that had been wired into me over 3 decades, flickered for a fraction of a second. I kept walking. The yacht party happened. I want to be honest about this because the version where my stand collapses the whole event would be more satisfying to report, but it wouldn't be true. Marcus found a way to cover the balance. My parents absorbed the gap, I assume, and the charter went forward on a Saturday in October when the river was flat, and the light was probably beautiful. Priya texted me the morning after. She said it was smaller than planned, quieter than expected. She said Marcus had seemed distracted, that he'd given a toast that mentioned family in a way that felt pointed but never specific, and that he'd barely smiled in the professional photos that had been one of the line items I'd declined to fund. She didn't say any of this to take my side. She said it, I think, because she was one of the 22 people on that guest list who had noticed the absence of the 23rd. I didn't feel glad. I want to be careful about this part, because the story that ends with the narrator feeling vindicated by someone else's diminished happiness is not actually the story I want to tell. What I felt, more accurately, was released. I was not celebrating. I was not monitoring. For the first time in 5 years of Octobers, I was simply living my own life while Marcus lived his, and those two things were happening independently of each other, as they probably should have been doing all along. For 2 weeks, I kept my distance. I answered my mother's calls when I felt ready, which was not immediately. I responded to my father's texts when I had something useful to say, which was rarely. I did not engage with Marcus at all, not because I was performing coldness, but because there was genuinely nothing to say to someone who had not yet said anything that warranted a response. Then, on a Tuesday evening, I came home from work to find an envelope in my mailbox. Not a text, not a voicemail. A letter, on cream stationery, in my mother's particular slanted handwriting, the handwriting I had seen on birthday cards she made for Marcus and grocery lists she left on the refrigerator and permission slips she signed for school trips, the handwriting that had simply never, not once in 5 years, appeared on an envelope addressed to me on September 14th. I made coffee before I opened it. This is a habit from work. Before you read a document that might change your understanding of a situation, make sure you're not hungry or rushed or standing up. The letter was 2 pages. The first page had defensive corners, the way first attempts usually do. She mentioned how hard she had worked throughout our childhoods, how much she had sacrificed, how she had never intended to make me feel less than. The familiar architecture of a partial apology, the kind that spends as much time on the apologizer's difficulty as on the harm itself. I read it the way I read a complex document, noting what was there, noting what wasn't, not making the absence into an accusation before I'd read to the end. The second page was different. She wrote that she knew she had centered Marcus since we were children. She wrote the words. She didn't soften them or wrap them in caveats. She wrote that she had treated my dependability like a permanent license rather than a choice I was making. She wrote that she had noticed my reliability and called it a personality trait instead of a gift, and spent a very long time not asking whether I was tired of giving it. And then she wrote the sentence I have since read more times than I can count. I remembered what you could do for us more easily than I remembered who you are. I think I have for a long time. I'm sorry, Sarah. My father sent a separate letter 3 days later. Shorter. Stiffer. The handwriting of a man who does not write letters and found the exercise both necessary and deeply uncomfortable. Most of it was practical, which was his register. He talked about what he thought had gone wrong procedurally, the way an engineer describes a structural failure. But near the end, one line. You were right to draw the line. I was wrong to call it punishing us. Marcus did not write. Marcus did not call. Marcus did not, in the weeks and months that followed, reach out in any form that contained the word sorry or acknowledged anything that had happened. This used to be the part that would have kept me awake, the missing piece, the holdout, the one member of the family whose silence I would have historically interpreted as my own failure. But I had started to understand, during those quiet 2 weeks, that Marcus's silence was not my problem to solve. Some people experience your boundary primarily as an inconvenience. Until that changes, there is nothing to say, and the attempt to force a resolution is just another way of doing emotional labor for someone who is not doing theirs. I wrote my mother back. Not warmly, that would have been dishonest, because warmth is something you earn back, not something you restore by writing a good second page. But honestly, I told her I wasn't interested in pretending the last 5 years had been fine, because they hadn't been, and we both knew it, and pretending otherwise was exactly the kind of smoothing over that had made the problem invisible for so long. I told her I was willing to build something that functioned, carefully on honest ground, with the understanding that certain things could not simply be walked back to the way they were. I told her that what I needed, going forward, was to be treated as a person in this family, not a resource. And I told her that I understood that was an adjustment, and I was willing to give it time as long as the adjustment was actually happening. She called me that evening. The conversation was short and slightly halting, like two people learning a new language they both wanted to speak but hadn't practiced yet. It was not the warm reconciliation of a movie. It was more honest than that, more real than that, more promising, in its awkwardness, than any number of smooth conversations had been before. And then, on September 14th of this year, which I had not announced, had not reminded anyone of, had not marked on any shared calendar or mentioned in any group thread, my phone rang at 8:02 in the morning. My mother. I stood in my kitchen in the early light with the coffee still brewing, and I answered. She said, "Happy birthday, Sarah. I'm sorry it took me this long." That was all. No justification. No pivot. No, but you have to understand. Just the sentence, said plainly, in a voice that sounded like it had cost her something to say. I stood there for a while after I hung up. The fog was still sitting on the city the way it does in the mornings before autumn burns it off. I could hear the coffee finishing. Gerald the plant was on the windowsill looking adequately healthy. I had nowhere to be until 9 o'clock and nothing I needed to fix for anyone else, and a birthday that had, for the first time in 6 years, been remembered by the person whose remembering had always mattered most. I made my coffee. I sat by the window. I let it be enough. Here is what I know now that I spent far too many years not knowing, and that I want to say directly before you close this tab or click away. Your reliability is not permission. The fact that you show up quietly, pay without complaining, absorb without escalating, extend the card and share the account, and cover the gap and smile through the oversight. That is not a personality type. That is a choice you make over and over because you love people and you were taught that love meant not making things difficult. But generosity given without limits is not generosity after a while. It is infrastructure. And infrastructure does not get birthdays. You are not ungrateful for wanting to be remembered. You are not dramatic for expecting to be invited to the thing you're being billed for. You are not selfish for finally, quietly, methodically, with your folder and your spreadsheet and your $1 single dollar, deciding that you would like to exist in this family as a person, with a name on the guest list, and not only as a line item in the payment breakdown. The boundary you're afraid to set is not cruel. The years before you set it, those were the years with the real cost. So tell me honestly, if your family forgot your birthday 5 years in a row and then sent you a $2,800 invoice for a party your name wasn't on, would you pay in full to keep the peace, send the $1 like I did, and let them figure out the rest, or close the whole ledger and walk away for good? I want to know where you land. Drop it in the comments.